Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever stopped to wonder why commercial aviation is statistically the safest mode of transportation on the planet, the answer doesn't just come down to better engineering. It really lies in how the industry responds to its absolute worst days. So today, we're dissecting the universal blueprint that makes this incredible safety record possible. We're looking at the Icao Annex 13 Aircraft Accident and Incident Investigations Report format, and we're going to break down exactly how these investigations are put together piece by piece.
All right, let's dive right into this. What we're looking at with Appendix 1 from Icao Annex 13 is essentially a foolproof investigative methodology. The explicit goal of this format is to present the final report in a convenient, uniform manner no matter where you are in the world. Whether an accident happens in Tokyo, Toronto, or Timbuktu, the resulting report is going to look exactly the same structurally. And it's this uniformity that lets safety agencies across the globe seamlessly share data, spot trends, and actually implement life-saving changes without getting bogged down by differing formats. It's a universal language for safety.
So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to walk through the 4 procedural pillars of every single final report: factual information, analysis, conclusions, and finally, safety recommendations. Let's get into it. But actually, right before we hit pillar number 1, we need to talk about the preamble, the title and the synopsis.
Think of this as the executive summary. It establishes the absolute baseline facts before we dive into the deep evidence. The title leaves literally zero room for ambiguity. It has to identify the operator, the manufacturer, the model, the nationality and registration marks of the aircraft, along with the precise place and date of the event. And right after that comes the synopsis. This outlines exactly who is investigating, so identifying the national authorities and any accredited representatives, and it wraps up with a brief resume of the circumstances that led to the accident. It gives us the who, what, where, and when right up front, setting a really clear stage for the rest of the document.
Okay, that brings us to the first official pillar of the report, factual information. This first section is literally the investigator's raw evidence file. It's the entire foundation of the investigation. Now, to keep this from just being a chaotic brain dump, the factual information section is meticulously chunked into 19 very specific subheadings. We can group these logically, starting with the machine and the journey itself. So subheading 1.1 covers the history of the flight. That's everything from pre-flight prep to a full reconstruction of the flight path. Then we get into the hardware. Section 1.3 details the damage to the aircraft, 1.6 dives into aircraft information like maintenance history, and 1.11 details the recovery and condition of those crucial flight recorders. The goal here is making sure absolutely no mechanical or operational stone is left unturned. What's really fascinating, though, is how this framework handles the human element. The human toll is quantified with absolute clinical precision using this exact matrix from Section 1.2. Investigators track fatal, serious, and minor or non-injuries across 3 distinct categories: crew, passengers, and others. It completely removes emotion from the data collection, giving everyone a stark, standardized picture of survivability and impact forces. From there, investigators have to systematically map out the environment and the aftermath. We're talking external factors. Subheading 1.7 requires detailed meteorological information, so both forecast and actual weather on the day. Section 1.10 covers the aerodrome conditions. Then we hit the aftermath itself. 1.12 demands a precise distribution pattern of the wreckage. 1.14 covers any fire occurrence and how effective the firefighting was. And 1.15 details all the survival aspects, like search, rescue, and evacuation efforts. Finally, this factual gathering phase zeroes in on the human and systemic elements. Under 1.5 and 1.13, investigators scrutinize the personnel. They're checking ages, the validity of licenses, duty times, and any relevant medical or pathological data of the crew. But, and this is key, it doesn't just stop with the pilots in the cockpit. Section 1.17 looks at the organizational and management information. They are scrutinizing the operators, the air traffic services, and the entire regulatory framework. Basically, the investigation has to examine the entire system that put those specific pilots in that specific aircraft on that particular day. So once we have all our raw facts, we move on to pillar 2, analysis. This is where the detective work really kicks in and we start connecting the dots. But there is a massive, strictly enforced rule here from the Annex. It says, analyze, as appropriate, only the information documented in 1, factual information. The analysis can only rely on the documented facts that are directly relevant to determining the causes, period. Investigators cannot speculate, they cannot introduce new rumors at this stage, and they definitely can't base their analysis on a gut feeling. If a fact wasn't firmly established in Pillar 1, it literally cannot be used in Pillar 2. This creates an airtight, completely bias-free logical flow. And that airtight logic leads us straight into Pillar 3, conclusions. This is the ultimate verdict, bringing everything to a sharp point. Here, investigators strip away all the narrative and just list the hard truths. They explicitly identify exactly what caused the tragedy or the incident. The format allows states to use terms like causes or contributing factors or both, which gives them the flexibility they need depending on the complex circumstances of the event. Now, this part is absolutely crucial, and honestly, it's a big reason why aviation safety keeps leveling up. The format explicitly demands that this list of conclusions includes both the immediate causes of the event and the deeper systemic causes or contributing factors. Because aviation accidents are almost never just one single thing going wrong. It's never just the engine failed or the pilot made a mistake. The report forces the entire industry to ask the hard questions. Why did the engine fail? Was there a hidden systemic maintenance issue? Why did the pilot err? Was there a fundamental flaw in the airline's training framework? We have to find the root. Which brings us to the fourth and final pillar, the ultimate goal of this entire process: safety recommendations. Once those root causes are clearly identified, investigators prescribe the cure. Based strictly on the conclusions we just talked about, they state their recommendations for preventing future accidents. And it's important to note, this is not about assigning legal blame. It is 100% about making sure this highly specific sequence of events never, ever happens again. This section also identifies any safety actions that have already been implemented, because a lot of times, an airline or a manufacturer will spot a known issue and fix it immediately during the investigation, rather than waiting months for the final report to be published. Of course, to keep the main body of the report readable and logically structured, it formally wraps up with the appendices. This acts as the ultimate repository for any other information necessary to fully grasp the findings. So this is where you're going to find those deeply technical diagrams, the pages of flight data recorder readouts, and all the complex charts. Okay, let's bring it all together and summarize this blueprint of aviation safety. To recap, this incredibly rigid anatomy is what transforms a chaotic tragedy into a highly structured engine for global safety. The Annex 13 report provides a uniform, globally recognized methodology. It rests entirely on 4 sequential pillars: facts, analysis, conclusions, and recommendations. It demands granular factual data, broken down across 19 distinct subheadings, so nothing slips through the cracks. It requires a strict separation of raw facts from the analysis to completely eliminate bias. And finally, it forces investigators to dig deep and identify both the immediate triggers and the deep systemic failures. This uncompromising framework is the precise reason aviation is able to learn from every single mistake. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. The incredible safety of modern commercial flight isn't just magic, it is the direct result of rigorous, uncompromising standardization. So the next time you board a flight, sit back and hear that seatbelt sign ding, will you think about the thousands of meticulously formatted pages, the strict facts, and the deep systemic analyses that made your journey so incredibly safe? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking questions.